首先，first I will read the legal disclaimer and the speaker information. 首先我会给大家说一下我们的法律免责声明以及我们的演讲者的相关的信息。This presentation has been prepared for general information purpose only and should not be considered legal advice. 本讲座仅供参考，不应该被视为法律建议。Nothing in this presentation is intended to create an attorney-client relationship or to be substitute for legal counsel. 本讲座中的任何内容均不旨在建立律师与客户之间的关系，或者替代一个法律顾问。The information presented is not guaranteed to be correct, complete, or up to date. 本讲座所提供的信息不保证是正确、完整或者是最新的。If you have a specific legal question, please consult an attorney. 如果你有具体的法律问题，请咨询律师。If you need help finding an attorney, please contact A.A. Barney's Legal Referral and Information Service. 如果您在寻找律师方面需要帮助，请致电纽约亚裔律师协会的法律推荐与信息服务。然后the English if you speak English, the number is 516-788-8820. 如果你说英语的话，如果你说普通话的话，那么电话是516-788-8821。然后as this presentation and Q&A session are being recorded and may be published online for public access, please do not communicate any sensitive personal information. 由于本次讲座及其问答环节都将会被录制下来，并且可能会在线发布以供公众访问，所以请大家不要透露敏感的个人信息。Speaker bio， 现在我来讲一下演讲者的背景信息。Kenson Inc. is a staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society. 我们的 Kenson Inc. 在是法律援助协会的专职律师。He specializes in representing tenants in the eviction proceedings in Manhattan Housing Court. 他专门在曼哈顿房屋法院的驱逐诉讼中代表租户。He has been with the Legal Aid Society for 5 years, during which time he has handled approximately 250 cases. 他在法律援助协会工作了5年，在此期间，他处理了大约250起案件。Preventing eviction in over 95% of them. 他在95%以上的案件中都防止了租户被驱逐。Prior to the Legal Aid Society, he worked at Legal Aid of Arkansas, specializing in government benefits and domestic violence issues. 在加入法律援助协会之前，他曾在阿肯色州法律援助机构工作，专门致力于政府福利和家庭暴力问题。He graduated from Columbia Law School in 2014. He currently lives in East Harlem. 他于2014年毕业于哥伦比亚法学院，他目前居住在东哈莱姆区。He is a second-generation immigrant from Southeast Asia. 他是来自东南亚的第2代移民。好，下面the next speaker is Rena Groom. Rena Groom is a housing court attorney currently assigned to Richmond County Housing Court. Rena 是目前分配到里士满县房屋法庭的房屋法庭律师。Before joining the housing court family, Rena was a tenant rights attorney at the Legal Services, New York City. 在加入房屋法庭的大家庭之前 ，Rena 是纽约市法律服务部门的租户权利律师。Rena believes in giving back to her community. She serves as the board chair at Arrears, a women-led nonprofit workers center committed to improving the lives of Nepali and Tibetan-speaking population in the U.S. by tackling social justice issues and implementing policy changes at the local, state, and national level. Rena 坚信应当回馈她的社区。她现在担任一个非营利工人中心 阿迪卡的董事会主席，致力于通过解决社会正义方面的问题，并在地方、州和国家的层面实施政策变革，来改善在美国的尼泊尔语和藏语人口的生活。Rina is also one of the co-chairs of AA Barney's Government Service and Public Interest Committee。Rina 还是纽约亚裔律师协会政府服务和公共利益委员会的联合主席之一。Rina obtained her law degree from New England Law, Boston, and undergraduate degree in finance from Queens College, CUNY。Rina 在波士顿新英格兰法学院获得法律学位，并在纽约市立大学皇后学院获得金融本科学位。So the next speaker is Megan Liu。然后下一个演讲者是 Megan Liu。Megan Liu is a legal fellow at Manhattan Legal Services Economic Justice Unit。Megan Liu 是曼哈顿法律服务部经济司法部门的法律研究员。She provides advice and direct legal representation in a range of civil practice areas, including employment discrimination, disability rights, unemployment benefits, and commercial evictions. 他在一系列的民事实践领域提供咨询和直接的法律代理，这些领域包括就业歧视、残疾权利、残疾人权利、失业救济和商业驱逐。She graduated from Harvard Law School in 2019 and has a bachelor's degree in economics and international relations from Tufts University. 她于2019年毕业于哈佛法学院，并获得塔夫茨大学经济和国际关系专业的学士学位。At law school, Megan practiced as a student attorney in the Family and Domestic Violence Law Clinic of the Legal Service Center and Harvard's International Student Rights Clinic。在法学院的时候 ，Megan 在法律服务中心的家庭暴力法律诊所以及哈佛的国际学生权利法律诊所担任学生律师。Megan is a 1.5 generation immigrant who is passionate about Asian American political participation, representation, and acculturation. Megan 是一个1.5代移民，她对于亚裔美国人的政治参与、代表性和文化适应充满热情。以上是我们的法律免责声明以及演讲者的背景介绍。So next we will start our presentation. 接下来我们将会开始我们的讲座。Hi May, I'm not a host, so I cannot share screen. So maybe someone can share the screen of the slides.
Sorry about that. We're going to have the screen shared in a moment. Thanks.
So Faye, you should be able to share screen now.
Okay. Okay. Oh.
Hi, Faye. Thank you for the introductions and starting this meeting, or rather the presentation. This is Know Your Rights Tenant, Landlord, and Rental Arrears clinic hosted by the Asian American Bar Association of New York, as well as we have representatives from the Legal Aid Society and Legal Services New York City. Attorneys will be giving this presentation. Next slide. So what is housing court? Housing court has cases from residential landlord-tenant matters, and there are various types of cases. It's called non-payment of rent case, holdover, and housing court.
什么是房屋法院呢？房屋法院就是处理跟房屋相关的案件的法院，然后它有不同类型的案件，包括拖欠租金、逾期占有和其他的房屋类案件。
Non-payment of rent case means exactly what it means. Your tenant does not pay rent, and then the landlord wants the property back, but the tenant gets the rent then the case is done. Holdover means it's not just about rent, it may be something else.
房屋拖欠租金的案件主要是很明显就是说房客没有交房租，这个时候房东就会告房客，然后当房客把房租交了的时候，这个案子就结束了。然后逾期占有的案件是其他的和租赁相关的事情。
Next slide, please. So what are holdover cases? Holdover cases are cases where the landlord brings the tenant to court for anything besides rent. Let's say, for example, breaching the lease, or you no longer have a lease and then you want the property back. So these are the types of cases which are called holdover.
逾期占有的案件呢，就是房东会告房客关于房租以外的任何的其他的问题，比如说你违反了一个你的租约上面的一个条款，或者是你的租约已经过期，但是你还不搬走等等原因。
Next slide, please. And the other large part of housing court is the HP cases. So historically speaking, housing court was actually formed because of HP cases being in criminal court. So housing court actually was formed for HP cases.
房屋法院还处理很多其他的房屋类的案件，然后它是很大一部分的案件都是跟这方面都是所谓的 HP case。
So in HP cases, there are two types. One type is the tenant sues the landlord.
然后在房屋类案件中 ，HP 案件中有2类诉讼，第一类就是房客会来告他的房东。
Generally, there are two types of cases that the tenant sues the landlord for. One is bad condition, like let's say, for example, you don't have heat and hot water, or the kitchen is broken and it needs to be fixed and the landlord has not fixed it. So it's purely for conditions.
房客诉房东有几个不同的方面，比如说有恶劣的居住条件，这比如说你家没有暖气，或者是没有热水，或者是你的厨房里面的设施坏了，然后房东不给予维修，这就是关于恶劣的居住条件方面的诉讼。
And the other type of case is harassment, which is defined by a particular housing maintenance code in New York City. And for example, harassment could be, for example, landlord will knock on the tenant's door all times of the day, all times of the night, trying to evict the tenant or asking the tenants to leave without a court order. That's one of the very simple examples that I can give.
另外一个房客可以诉房东的 HP 案件呢，就是骚扰，也就是比如说你的房东就没日没夜的就敲你的房门，然后就是要你离开，但是他没有一个合法的法院的法令，但是他就是不停的骚扰你，这是另外一个房东可以诉房客的 HP 案件。
And the tenant can also allege harassment if there are many conditions that exist in the particular apartment and the landlord keeps on ignoring those cries by the tenant to get those conditions taken care of, then that could also become a form of harassment.
如果租户的房屋有一些问题，然后房主一直忽略，这也可以造成一种骚扰的一种类型。
And the other type of case is the city brings case against the landlord, the city of New York, which is called DHPD, or the Department of Housing Preservation and Development.
另外一个 HP 房屋案件的类型就是由纽约市房屋保护与发展部门来诉房东。
One of the types of cases is, again, bad conditions. So the city either tries to get someone else to manage the building, or another type of case is because of the conditions, they will file for civil penalties to penalize the landlord with fines.
其中一个纽约市可以来诉房东的类型，就是说您的就是租用的房屋，然后居住的条件比较差，然后 纽约市呢，它可以申请让其他的人来管理这个租住的房屋，或者是向法院申请对房东给予一定的惩罚。
And the final type of case that the city can bring against a landlord is access action, where the condition is so bad that the city actually wants to go in the apartment to fix the issues. Let's say, for example, there is no heat and hot water. The city wants to go in and restore those heat and hot water, and the city needs an order from the judge to actually go in and do the work.
还有一个类型房屋，纽约市房屋与保护发展部门可以诉房东的，就是叫做进入权诉讼。也就是说，当房屋的那个房主的那个你的住户的条件，当住户的条件不符合要求的时候，纽约市可以向法院申请进入那个房屋来进行维修之类的。Sorry.
It's fine. And the court ultimately issues an order in this type of cases if there is no resolution by meeting of the minds of the landlord and tenant. Or the city.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? Sorry.
Yeah, the court ultimately issues an order if there is no meeting of the minds by the tenant suing the landlord or the city suing the landlord. There is an order that the judge writes.
法院最终会不管如果没有房客和房东，或者是纽约市跟房东之间没有形成很好的协商的话，那么法院会最终下达一个法令来督促房主更正他的行为。
All right, thank you, everyone. Next slide is Kenton. Over to you, Kenton.
Great, thanks so much, Rena. That was some great information. Now we're going to talk about what exactly a moratorium is. You all have probably heard a lot about moratoriums in recent days.
接下来由我来进行接下来的讲座，然后我将会说什么是暂缓，然后你最近可能听到了很多关于这个暂缓方面的事情。
So a moratorium just means that the housing case is stopped. There can't be any court appearances and especially no evictions while a case is stopped. Now that said, landlords and tenants can still talk to one another to try to resolve the case.
暂缓就是说暂时房屋和房主和房客之间的事情暂时没有，只是暂缓执行，然后但是房东和房客之间还是可以继续的进行沟通。
Last week, when we made this presentation, there were 3 different moratoriums in place: CFA, ERAP, and the CDC moratorium. We're going to talk about all of them, but one thing I want to note is that this is not last week. This is today, and the laws have changed. We're going to get into all that later, but I'll let you take that. Sorry.
暂缓呢，现在有3个方面的暂缓，然后分别叫 CFA， 还有 ERAP， 还有 CDC。然后我们想告诉大家的是，法律可能随时会变化。然后这个刚过去的这一周就发生了一定的变化。
I want to emphasize that this is a very dynamic time in housing practice, and so a lot of laws are changing. What we tell you is the best thing that I know as of today, but things can change. So listen to the news, follow updates, and above all, speak to a lawyer before deciding anything. This is just an overview as of today.
想跟大家继续强调一下的是，今天这个讲的事情只是今天有效，然后我们法律可能随时会变化。在你处理任何事情之前，一定要咨询一下律师，然后要跟上那个新闻和其他法律方面的变化的脚步。
The first moratorium that we're going to talk about is CFA. That's the COVID-19 Emergency Eviction and Foreclosure Prevention Act. It's set up by New York State. You get it by filing a hardship declaration, and it would have expired by the end of this month.
然后我现在第一个跟大家讲的就是新冠肺炎下关于防止驱逐和房屋拍卖的紧急法案，就是 CFA。然后它是纽约州颁布的，然后它最近的失效期是2021年的8月31号。
However, on Thursday, the Supreme Court may have eliminated this moratorium, so it may not exist. I say may not because we're not sure yet. It's still developing. We're still trying to figure out what the decision means, but it does seem likely that this may no longer be a moratorium.
现在刚刚过去的这个周四，可能最高法院已经就是取消了这一个暂缓，但是我只能说可能，因为现在这个事情还没有很确定。
As with all things, it's a developing situation. So this may apply, this may not apply. It probably won't, but you should still be aware of it.
这个我想跟大家说，是因为它可能因为刚刚过去的这一周发生了变化嘛，然后它可能适用，也可能不适用。但是我想让您知道有这么一个暂缓的法案在这里。
Next slide, please. Okay, this is a brief thing about how to get a hardship declaration. Because in all likelihood, this is no longer a valid moratorium, we're not going to talk about it.
这个是关于怎么申请困难申报的，也就是刚刚那个 C 法的法案，你要如何申请暂缓，就必须申请困难申报的。然后现在因为不确定它是否适用，我们暂时不说它。
Yeah, and similarly here, doesn't apply anymore. This is the next one.
OK， 所以我们将也跳过这一个。
The next thing that we want to talk about is called the ERAP moratorium. Now, ERAP stands for Emergency Rental Assistance Program.
接下来我要跟大家讲的是 ERAP 暂缓，然后它代表的是紧急租金救助项目。
As you may have guessed from the name, it's a program that helps people pay for any rent that they may owe, but they haven't paid. It's set up for the entire United States. And when you get the moratorium, when you apply for ERAP, and that moratorium lasts until they make a decision on whether or not they're going to help you pay your rent.
就像这个项目的名字一样，它就是帮助租户交租金的，然后它在整个美国都适用。然后在你提交了申请之后，在针对你这个申请做出最终决定之前，它是不会失效的。在做出最终决定之时，它就失效了。
Next slide, please. Okay. So the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, we're going to get into some details on what ERAP is. It's a program that can help cover rent and arrears, and it can pay up to 12 months of arrears, and in some cases, an additional 3 months.
再跟大家详细解释一下紧急租金救助项目的一些细节，然后它可以帮助租户提交12个月的租金，有时候甚至可以再额外另加3个月的租金。
Tenants and landlords can also help on this, can apply at that URL on your screen.
房东也可以协助你来申请这个项目，然后可以通过就是屏幕上的这个链接来申请。
This would be a good time to copy it down, or you can just search ERAP NYC on Google.
您可以现在记录下这一个网址链接，也可以就是在 Google 上面搜索，然后ERAP， 记住这个 ERAP， 然后在 Google 上面搜索 ERAP NYC。
Note that this program is only available to low-income households. That said, it's worth checking to see whether you do qualify.
值得一说的是，这个项目主要是针对低收入人群的，但是您可以去咨询一下、搜索一下，看自己是否符合这个收入条件的要求。
Please note that the application, one last thing. Please note that the application is quite lengthy. You should allow yourself about 2 hours to get through it all.
请大家注意，这个申请就是非常的长，然后所以大家要准备至少2个小时的时间来填这个项目的申请。
Okay, now next slide. Sorry. Okay, the last moratorium that we're going to talk about is the moratorium from the Centers for Disease Control, or CDC.
最后一个我要跟大家讲的 关于现在目前的暂缓，就是来自于美国疾控中心的，然后这个暂缓。
It's set up by the federal government. It originally applied to everyone, and it will expire in October 3rd, 2021.
这个疾控中心的这个暂缓呢，是联邦政府发布的，然后它基本上对每一个人都适用。
Also, Bay, you can hit the button one more time. There we go. This too had a recent change. It was supposed to expire, but it was lengthened by the president. However, this may be challenged to the Supreme Court and it may be overturned. So this too could change.
这一个暂缓呢，已经有人申请了延长，但是有可能会被最高法院给驳回，所以这个也可能会有改变，所以这个也不是很确定它的具体的失效日期。
Okay, now next slide. So now I want to talk specifically to any landlords out there.
现在我想对房东说一些法律方面的事情。
If you're going to sue your tenant for whatever reason, arrears or other issues like in a holdover that Rena was talking about earlier, it's strongly recommended that you get a lawyer.
不管你是想诉你的房客，就是你的租客，不管是他的租金拖欠，还是他逾期占有房屋的方面的问题，我强烈建议大家找一个律师。
The legal system is very complex, and it is very difficult for a non-lawyer to know what to do and say in court.
法律程序方面非常的复杂，所以一般的人可能就不知道应该怎么样去做，所以才强烈建议大家找一个律师。
If you choose not to get a lawyer, you will be what's called pro se, which just means that you are going to court without a lawyer.
如果你不找一个律师，那么在法律英语上来说，就是你自己代表自己就是 pro se， 然后你到法院里面所走的任何程序都不会有律师对你进行指导。
If you are pro se, you should talk to the clerk in the local housing court to figure out what documents to file and how properly to do that. But again, it is recommended that you hire a lawyer because it is complex and the clerk cannot run your case for you.
如果您打算自我代理的话，那您就得去法院里面，然后找法院里面的法律助理，然后问他您要怎么样进行你的案件。但是我还是强烈建议大家能够找一个律师来处理你的事情。
Next slide, please. So this slide is mostly for landlords, but tenants, it's worth paying attention as well.
这一张图片主要是告诉大家，主要是跟房东说，但是房客也应该知道。
Landlords, you may not evict a tenant by yourself. You must go through the courts and the marshals.
房东你自己是不能自己驱逐一个房客的，房东是必须走法院程序、法院的处理还有执行程序来进行这一个驱逐的过程的。
It is illegal for a landlord to change the locks on the door themselves or to forcefully move out a tenant themselves.
如果房东自己主动驱逐房客或者是换房屋的锁，这是在法律上来说是违法的。
Tenants, if your landlord changes the locks on your door or forcefully moves you out of your house, you should go to the police and go to the court to explain what has happened.
所有的房客，如果你们的房东把你们的锁换了，让你不能进去，或者是强制把你驱逐出了您的房屋，你应该向警察或者是向法院报告这个事情。
Lastly, again, to reiterate, landlords do not attempt to change the locks on the door yourself. It is illegal.
再声明一次，房东请不要自己把房客的锁给换了，也不要自己去驱逐房客，这个是违法的。
Sorry, and yeah, thank you. Okay. All right, the next few sections will be specifically for tenants. So landlords, you can ignore for a bit.
接下来的几个幻灯片呢，都是跟房客相关的。
So I've spoken to a lot of tenants, and many people are very concerned that once they start owing money, they might have to go to court or they might be at risk for eviction.
很多人就是担心啊，如果我欠房租，我是不是就要去法院，或不然我就得被驱逐了。
You do not need to go to court until you receive a petition.
您不需要去法院除非您收到了一个叫 petition 叫请愿书。
A petition starts a case.
一个 petition 一个请愿书才会在法院里面新开一个案件。
Lastly, you'll note that we would previously advise anyone to fill out a hardship declaration so that they will be protected by CFA. This no longer applies.
然后我之前跟大家说的那个 CFA 它会要求大家 CFA 那个暂缓会要求大家提交一个困难申报，但是现在这个已经不再适用了。
So once you've received a petition and you have a case, you have officially been sued.
如果你收到了一个请愿书，然后你就是正式的被告了，这个时候你就法院里面就有了一个关于你的案子。
The first thing you should do is go to court and file what's called an answer. It's basically a response to all of the things the landlord is saying.
你要做的第一个事情就是跑到法院提交您的答辩状，这是基本上就是您写下关于针对房东对你的诉讼进行你的方面的故事方面的叙述。
This is where you should raise any issues you have with the case or with the landlord.
这个时候您在您的答辩状上就可以写上任何的关于您的案件以及您对您房东的任何方面的一些想说的都可以写在答辩状上。
Some common issues include, but are not limited to, you never received proper documentation, you don't owe all the money includes late or legal fees, or there are bad conditions in your apartment.
通常您可以写在答辩状上关于您答辩状上的理由可以说是你从来没有收到过您欠房租的这种通知，你也没有，或者是你根本不欠这个房租，或者是你的房屋的条件不是很好等等方面的原因，您都可以写在这个答辩状上。
Once you have a legal case, you will start receiving court dates in the mail or via email. It is important that you attend all the court dates. No, it's important you attend all the court dates.
如果您收到了任何法院方面的文书，很可能上面就会写上您需要去法院处理案件的日期。您在这里建议大家的就是，如果你的文书上面有一个日期要您过去参加一个听证或者是什么的，您必须得去参加，最好是去参加。
If there's an emergency and you cannot attend court, you should call the court to let them know. Also, if you have a lawyer, you should speak to your lawyer to see if you need to be there.
如果您不能，因为如果那个您收到的文书上的那个日期，您不能到法院去的话，那么您一定要打电话跟法院说清楚您的情况。如果你有个律师的话，你也一定要咨询你的律师，你不能出席，或者是你应该怎么办。
Which brings me to my third point. Sorry, that last point. Which brings me to my third point. You should really consider getting a lawyer.
这也是我告诉大家的，您真的需要最好需要还是找一个律师。
We're going to be on this slide for a little bit, just so you know. It's important to have a lawyer because the legal system is very complex. And especially if your landlord has a lawyer, you don't want them to take advantage of you.
我建议大家找一个律师的原因呢，是因为在美国的法律系统呢其实是很复杂的。然后，如果您的房东有一个律师的话，那么您将处于一个法律上面的劣势。
If you cannot afford a lawyer, you can ask the city for a free lawyer at your first court appearance.
如果您付不起一个律师的律师费的话，您可以在你的第一个法庭要求你出面的那个时候，向法院申请一个免费的律师。
Once you have a lawyer, it is very important to listen to what your lawyer says and to cooperate with them. If you do not trust your lawyer, you can always fire them. But as long as you have a lawyer, it is very important to work closely with them because they will be representing you in court.
一旦您有了一个律师的话，你很重要的就是你需要听律师的意见，以及跟律师合作。当然，你什么时候对这个律师不满意，您是可以解雇这个律师的。但是我还是建议大家，如果有律师，能够跟律师合作，因为律师是跟你一起在为你的案件而工作的。
Next slide, please. The last thing I want to talk about is what happens if you receive a marshal's notice.
最后一个我想跟大家说的是，跟大家说的是，如果您收到了一个法院的执行通告，那么您应该怎么做？
A marshal's notice is very serious and is the last warning you get before you are legally evicted.
那个 marshal's notice 也就是相当于一个执行的通告，它是很严肃的一个事情，然后它是在即将把你驱逐之前的最后一个警告。
If you receive a marshal's notice, you should go to court immediately and if you receive a marshal's notice and you have a lawyer, you should tell your lawyer immediately.
如果您收到了一个执行通告，而且你有一个律师的话，你应该马上告诉你的律师您收到了这个通告。
I always tell my clients that if they get a marshal's notice, they should call me. You shouldn't text me, don't email me, don't leave me voicemail, call me until I confirm that I've received it because it is that serious.
这个执行通告很严肃，我通常告诉我的客户，如果您收到了一个 marshal's notice， 如果您收到了一个执行通告的话，我都要他们不要给我发短信，不要给我发邮件，你要打电话给我，直到我接到，我确认我收到了这个信息，才罢休，不然的话，你得继续联系你的律师。
If you do not have a lawyer, you will need to go to court yourself as soon as possible and explain that you received a marshal's notice and that you do not want to be evicted and that you would like to speak to a judge.
如果您没有一个律师的话，当您收到一个执行通告之后，你要马上到法院里面去，然后向他们说明您的情况，然后并且申请跟法官能够说一下，跟法官说话。
I want to note that a marshal's notice is very, very serious, and it doesn't matter how safe you think you are. Even if you haven't received a petition, even if you don't think you owe any money, even if a judge said you shouldn't be evicted, if you receive a marshal's notice, you need to take immediate action.
我想跟大家再次强调一下，您如果收到了 marshal's notice， 也就是这个执行通告的话，这是一个真的非常紧急和严肃的事情。它就是就算你自己认为我没什么事儿，我不欠钱，或者是我也没有什么问题的话，您也应当走法律的程序，因为这个是个很紧急的事情。
Marshal's notices are easily dealt with if dealt with promptly, but they must be dealt with. You cannot ignore them.
这个执行通告呢，如果很快速的处理的话，是比较容易处理的。但是这个前提是要快。
Now we're going to move on to Megan Liu, who is going to talk to you a bit about commercial tenants' rights.
接下来我们将由 Megan 刘演讲者来给大家讲关于商业租户的一些法律问题。
Thank you, Kenzing. And all of that was so important. We just wanted to spend a few minutes here at the end talking about the rights of commercial tenants and what to do if you're a commercial tenant or a small business owner, because the rules are largely the same as for residential tenants, but there are a few key differences. And as we know, the pandemic has not only affected everybody's housing, but it's affected businesses really strongly as well. So small business owners who have been unable to pay rent because of the pandemic could also be threatened with eviction.
我们知道受到这个疫情的影响，很多的小的企业还有商业的租户也受到了很大的打击，所以也没办法来 付这个房租，所以我将要讲一些关于商业租户方面的一些问题。
And so to start with, a lot of the rules that Rena and Kensing talked about apply to commercial tenants as well. Where cases go, as a commercial tenant, you could be sued by your landlord in civil court or Supreme Court. There's landlord and tenant court. And as Kensing was talking about, the same procedures where if you've been threatened with eviction and then you receive a marshal's notice, it's the same kind of urgency. So a lot of those procedural rules also apply to commercial tenants.
然后我想跟大家说的是，对于商业租户来说的话，跟之前2位演讲者讲的，他们那些程序，还有那些法律方面的东西，对商业租户是同样适用的。也就是说，你也可能被房东起诉啊，你也可能收到一个执行通告啊，这方面的东西都是通用的，都是也适用于商业租户的。
But on a big picture level, the key difference with residential tenants is that there are much fewer, almost no federal and state legal protections for commercial tenants.
一个很关键的与普通租户、商业租户与普通居民租户的那种区别，就在于商业租户少了很多联邦和州方面的法律保护。
In New York, we have a high respect for freedom of contract, and especially when it's involving a business instead of housing. So as a commercial tenant, your contract with your landlord, your commercial lease, what's in the contract is what you've agreed to. So if you're wondering, what are my rights? You look at your contract. And then in the case of a commercial lease, if you haven't paid your rent, there are very few defenses you'll have in court.
在纽约和在美国非常重要的，在法律上非常重要的一个原则就是合同自由原则。也就是说，如果对于商业租户来说，很多情况下你在您的租约上会有很多很关键的信息，比如说在您被起诉了，或者是在被房东起诉的情况下，你想要知道你会有什么样的权利和义务，那么你就要回去看你的和你房东的那个租约上面是怎么写的。然后很多情况下，可能就是对于商业租户来说，您并没有很多很好的保护，法律方面的保护，即使在您的租约之中。
So if you haven't yet negotiated with your landlord some kind of payment plan or some kind of rent abatement, it's highly likely you'll be stuck and owe this money. Over the past few months, people and businesses have tried to make the argument like it was the pandemic, it wasn't our fault, the government shut us down, how could we possibly have paid rent if we didn't have business? But unfortunately, the courts have so far just not been sympathetic to these kinds of arguments.
就是如果商业租户还没有跟您的房东商量一个您怎么付房租的一个计划，或者是您没有跟房东商量来减免你的房租的话，那么你可能现在就欠了一些房租。很多商业租户会在法律程序上面说我是受疫情的影响啊，我是受这个经济的疫情的影响，然后经济受到了很大的损失，但是法院和法律在这方面并没有对商业租户有很大的同情。
And so that's why with the upcoming, originally we thought the moratorium in New York, the eviction moratorium, which also applied to commercial tenants, was going to expire at the end of this month. And we were hopeful that New York would extend this moratorium and give everybody some more time. But with this new Supreme Court decision, it's very likely that landlords are going to start moving immediately to evict, including commercial landlords.
就是纽约州的这个暂缓，因为在之前很快就会过期了，然后就之前过去的这个周4的最高法院的那个决定来说，很可能现在房东就可以马上来驱逐商业租户了。
So then the question is, as a commercial tenant, if you haven't been paying rent to your landlord, what to do if your landlord has either made grumblings that they're going to move to evict, or if they've already sent you eviction notice? There are 2 tracks. One is you need to start immediately negotiating, and if not already, apply for small business relief. and 2, prepare for litigation to buy yourself more time to recover financially enough to strengthen your bargaining power with your landlord.
在商业租户受到疫情如果受到疫情的影响，然后无法付房租啊等等这些被房东诉了的话，那么你可以采取2种方式，比如说跟您的房东协商，接下来该怎么处理。如果协商不成的话，你也可以进行诉讼。这诉讼的话会需要一些时间，所以可以给你一些时间，你走诉讼这个程序的话，可以给你一些时间来恢复，来经济上面来恢复一下您能配房租的付房租的这个能力。
So on the first track, just in terms of general negotiation, small business owners, I'm sure, have been following the different government programs that have come out to try to give small businesses relief. For example, one is Save Our Storefronts, which if you lost more than 40% of revenue from 2019 to 2020, you are eligible for that program. That's one example. So on that front, you need to go out and you need to research what relief is available out there and then let your landlord know, hey, like you're pursuing these relief options.
首先要让大家知道是大家应该上网去搜索一下您在这个商业租户在法律上面会有怎样的一些救济方式，然后你要跟你的房东说，我现在找到了这个我希望可以跟您协商一下这个问题。
And then second, on the litigation front, it's a little trickier because out in the legal services world, there are a lot of great pro bono legal aid organizations who support residential tenants, and then there's not that same kind of litigation support for commercial tenants. But there are a couple things I want to flag, and that'll be on the next slide.
很多还有就诉讼，就除了协商之外，诉讼这条路来说，商业租户虽然现在有很多的法律援助的组织，但是他们对于商业租户的帮助可能是没有那么大的。
So something that Kenzing really emphasized earlier is that it's always a good idea to hire a lawyer, consultant, expert. So if you are a commercial tenant and your lease is in the name of your business, you actually must hire a lawyer. A business may not represent itself pro se in court. So if your commercial lease is under your company name, you must have a lawyer to go to court.
就像刚刚之前 Kenzie 律师所说的，就是希望大家能够最好的是能雇佣一个律师。但是对于商业租户来说，如果你的租约是以您作为租户，您的租约是以你的这个企业的名义来签订的话，那么您必须找一个律师。您不能作为一个企业的话是不能自己代理自己的。
And then if you are an individual, if you're an individual and you've signed your commercial lease in your individual name, unfortunately, what that means is that your personal assets can be used to satisfy your business debts.
如果您的租约上是你以个人名义签订的话，那么这意味着你的个人财产将有可能会被执行来满足这个诉讼的房东的要求。
And in this case, while you have the option of representing yourself in court, because the amount of rent arrears is likely very high, it would still be in your benefit to have a legal consultation with a lawyer to help you explore defenses, because that would be a really tough case for you to win against a commercial landlord without legal help.
如果您是可以个人自我代理，也就是说你的租约是写在您个人名下的话，你就可以自我代理。但是也强烈建议大家大家还是找一个律师，因为律师可以帮您寻找法律上有可能的抗辩的理由，来帮助您的案件。
And then there's a unique piece to commercial leases that doesn't exist in residential leases, which is called a personal guarantee provision.
然后在商业租约上面有一个跟 普通居民租约不同的一点，就是商业租约上面基本上可能会有这个个人担保的这种条款。
And that operates as the same idea as if you had signed the lease in your individual name. That provision usually states that if you owe business debts, including rent to your landlord or other expenses to your landlord, that your individual assets can be used to pay those debts. And so you want to go back to your lease and look for whether or not there's a personal guarantee provision in there.
如果您不确定的话，大家应当商业租户的话，应当回去看一下自己的那个商业租约，因为很可能上面会有这种个人担保的这种条款，即使你的租约是以你的企业的名义签的，但如果里面有个人担保的这种条款的话，您个人是可以被法院执行您的个人财产来满足这个房东的诉求的。
So one protection that the government did put in place during the pandemic for commercial tenants is that they were not enforcing personal guarantees for a period of time, starting from March of 2020.
在法律上面有一个针对于商业租户上面的保护，政府给商业租户的一个保护，就是现在对于个人担保的话，可以暂时不执行，从2020年3月开始。
So personal guarantees provisions were not enforced if you met certain criteria, such as if your business was one of the ones that was required to be shut down by executive order early on. So there are a few criteria that you need to meet, and that lack of enforcement lasted until the end of June. Right now, since we're past June of 2021, it's kind of unclear what the state of that is. But at least for that time period, the personal guarantee provision in your contract does not apply.
在你的这个很重要的一点，律师刚刚讲的那个个人担保，如果有这个条款的话，是可以在一定的条件下是可以暂缓执行的，比如要满足一定的条件，比如说您的企业是被一个行政法令强制关闭的，这样子的话，您可能满足其中一个条件。但是这个暂缓的这个法案呢，只是从2020年3月到2021年6月，因为2021年6月已经过去了的话，现在这个个人担保是否能够再执行，现在还是一个很不确定的情况。
And so as Kenzing said, things change really quickly. We have to just wait and see what happens, like whether it's the enforceability of the personal guarantee provision, how long this moratorium will last, how fast landlords will move. But the best thing you can do for yourself is talk to a lawyer as soon as possible to help you both negotiate and defend against litigation.
就像之前 Kenzie 所说的，然后现在就是法律还是非常的不确定的，因为现在很多的东西，现在不管是暂缓，还有这个个人担保，还有这个驱逐方面都发生了，觉得最近期都可能会发生很大的变化，所以最好还是建议大家紧跟上法律的那些最新的变化而且找一个律师。
And that's it for me.
Thanks, Megan. That was some really useful information. Thank you so much for bringing that to us. We're going to have a question and answer session later, but right now I want to just point out a few other resources that you can reach out to if you have questions.
我现在想跟大家说一下一些可以利用的资源，如果您在房屋方面有租住房屋方面有问题的话。
So one thing that started during the pandemic and is still going to continue on is that the city has created a housing hotline for tenants if they have any questions.
很重要，其中一个很重要的资源就是说，纽约市已经给大家开通了一个311租客房屋的热线，可以来帮助大家。
To get to the hotline, call 311 and ask for the housing hotline.
如果你需要打这个电话的话，你首先拨打311，然后在里面说你要找房屋热线，就是 housing hotline， 你要找房屋方面的热线，这样子他才会把你转接到跟房屋方面有相关的信息和帮助上面。
Note that the housing hotline is for advice on what to do in your situation. It is not for getting a lawyer.
很重要的告诉大家的一点就是，您打311的话，只是可以咨询关于您个人情况的如何做的一些能够获取一些建议，但是那个电话不是用来找律师的。
Also, the housing hotline is specifically for residential tenants. So landlords, if you call, I'm afraid we won't be able to give you any advice. Same with commercial tenants.
311热线主要是针对居民住户的。如果您是房东或者是商业租户的话，这个热线对您不是很有帮助。
But for residential tenants who need advice, you can call the housing hotline. If you do need a lawyer, you should go to court and request one. Don't just call the hotline.
如果您需要对于居民住户的话，如果您想要一些建议，您可以打这个311热线。但是如果您需要找一个律师的话，打这个热线是没用的，你得额外找方式来找律师。
Next, we have some resources for landlords and tenants, and anyone can call on these. These are some numbers. These are, I believe, for the courts. They won't be able to help you with everything, but that can be a good start to get information and figure out what your next steps are.
接下来这一些电话呢，就是不仅仅是给房客的，这是房东和房客都可以拨打的一些热线，他们不会就是帮您提供很多的帮助，但是能够给你一个很好的开始，你能够了解一下基本的信息，还有你接下来该怎么做方面的信息。
Now we're going to go back to Megan to talk a little bit about some of the resources specifically available for commercial tenants.
接下来由 Megan 跟大家讲一下对于商业租户可以利用的一些资源。
Thanks, Kensing. So there are multiple legal services organizations out there that will help commercial tenants renegotiate their leases or discuss leases with commercial landlords in the cases where commercial landlords are being particularly stubborn. But if you're a commercial tenant and you've already received a petition or eviction notice and you need a consultation on how to answer a petition in court or potential defenses or how to go to court, my organization, Legal Services of New York City, we're offering free consultations for income eligible individuals.
如果您现在其实市面上有很多的机构能够为商业租户跟房东之间能够重新协商这个租约的问题，但是如果你已经收到了一个请愿书，或收到了法院的文书，或者是收到了一个执行通知，驱逐执行的通知，那么您现在就你现在可能需要知道我有哪些抗辩的理由，我要怎么样去法院进行我的案件。那么现在对于我所在的机构，这个 Megan 律师所在的机构的话，它是纽约市法律服务中心，那么它就会可以为有一些商业租户提供免费的咨询。
And so you can make an appointment at the number on the slide. You should hopefully all have also received handouts with the phone number and the organization name. And then prior to calling, you would want to have ready your lease, which is the basis of all of your rights, any notices that you've received regarding going to court, and then receipts proving what rent you have been able to pay over these past few months.
如果你想要就是做一个跟我们做免费咨询的话，我所在的纽约市法律服务中心的话，就可以跟大家来预约。如果你想要预约跟我们预约的话，你要打现在这个幻灯片上面的这个电话，然后您来的时候一定要准备好相关的一些文件，比如说您收到的关于要去什么时候去法院的通知还有其他的法律文书，您的租约以及您过去有提交您的租金的一些收据，都把它准备好。
And then on the next side, I know some of you are very self-sufficient, and as we all know, it can take a long time to get on the phone with a lawyer. So there is a guide online. It's available in multiple languages, English, Chinese, Spanish, and Korean. And there's information in there. It's pretty long, but there's information in there walking you step by step through the court process if you have received a petition or a complaint, and then also at a high general level, some defenses you might have.
如果您收到了法院的请愿书或者是一个起诉书，那么您可以就是像现在这个屏幕上面显示的这么有一个对于租户的房东纠纷指南的这个指导的一个资源，您可以从下面这个链接去了解，然后这个指南有很多的语言，包括中文、英文、西班牙语还有韩语，然后它可以让大家就是能够基本的了解一下如何做。
That's it here.
这是我想说的部分。
All right, well, thank you all so very much for coming. Thank you to our wonderful presenters for all this great information. If you have any questions for me, you can always contact me at, I'll give you my cell phone number, my email. I will note that I specialize in providing legal services for low-income tenants. So if you're a landlord, I can't really help you much. And if you're commercial, go to the resources that Megan was telling you about.
如果最后非常感谢大家来听这个讲座。如果你们想联系我的话，可以通过这个电视上不是这个幻灯片上面的这些联系方式来跟我进行联系。我的专长是为租户居民租户来提供法律要求，这是我的专长；法律帮助，这是我的专长。然后，如果您是商业租户的话，您可以通过刚刚之前 Megan 律师讲的那些途径来进行一些自我帮助。然后，如果大家联系我的话，就通过幻灯片这个联系方式来联系我吧。
I also want to note that I do not speak, I only speak English, so don't call and leave a voicemail if you don't speak English. However, you can text or email me in Chinese. Be sure you use simple words, don't use slang or idioms, because I will be using a translator for those.
这个跟大家说，就是大家给我联系的时候，我是因为我主要是说英语，所以所以大家不要跟我打电话，然后留言留中文。但是大家可以给我发短信或者写邮件，然后给我用简单的中文交流，不要写俚语或者是一些方言什么的，大家都用比较简单的中文可以跟我交流的。
Thank you so much for coming.
谢谢大家来听这个讲座。
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for everyone for helping us out. So now it's time for Q&A. Does anyone have any questions?
现在是问答环节，如果有人有问题的话，可以问。
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm trying to actually figure out like how to do this. If no one has any questions, we're just gonna wait for 2 more minutes. And afterwards, we will actually move forward with our next presentation, which will be about anti-Asian violence. Thank you. Hi, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for showing up. We're going to end the presentation right now, but we do have another presentation to share the script that everyone will be able to see the PSA. I want to thank again our speakers, and also Megan and Tenzing. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to help us out. I hopefully I'll have more of these presentations coming up soon. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.